Okay, so I am here with Alison Pill for take 2 of Hope Beyond the Headlines. Alison, thank you so much for joining us. My supporters, your supporters, everybody was so excited about the Instagram Live that we recorded last week, and it was really disappointing that the quality was challenging. So for you to take time again to come speak to us again is so very, 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 very appreciated.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Yes, no, these new times call for better technological abilities than I am sort of currently gifted with, but we'll see.
Maybe we're all learning a bit of patience. Retake. And every day is a little bit like Groundhog Day anyways, right?
Exactly.
So, and sometimes in really good ways and terrible ways. I mean, the Groundhog Day that I'm currently really unhappy about is last week when we were talking about why you ran for Maud and Ahmaud Arbery's death. And then today we are confronted again with another African-American man killed due to police brutality. And I read today that the 6th greatest cause of African-Americans dying in America is actually police.
Yeah, of African-American men.
African-American men. So we don't want patience for that, and we don't want Groundhog Day on that. But I really appreciate your patience with coming back. So I'm the CEO of Women for Women International. Alison is one of our ambassadors. She's been helping us spread the word about our program in Congo and Afghanistan, Iraq, South Sudan, places where women are hit the hardest, the absolute hardest, with conflict, with poverty. But Alison, most people know you as a phenomenal actor. Currently, I've just had the privilege of watching you in Devs. Other people are watching you in Star Trek Picard. But what we really all want to know is, who are you behind those roles? Can you start by telling us about you, including, I understand you've been an actor since like before I even knew what I wanted to do besides play tetherball. So while I was out playing tetherball, you were having a career. So tell us about how you got into being an actor so young, and why you chose that, and how you became an activist in support of Women for Women too.
I think I became an actor. I mean, I think in the beginning it was curiosity and attention seeking and all of those things, like a combination of all those things. And then I was like, you can get paid for playing pretend? This is perfect. Everybody should do this job. I think I was also wrestling with like I think a lot of people wrestle with what makes other people do what they do. And I think acting is one of the best ways to understand it, to understand other humans, or to really try and walk a mile in their shoes, to really get inside someone else's skin and comprehend what might motivate them, to really try and understand them. And then on top of that, just people's stories are fascinating, because I find it really easy. I found it really hard to have faith in humanity, just with the news and just sort of where we're at, what the lack of universal truth and just kind of feeling overwhelmed, but then really being able to picture myself in these other positions and thinking about the fear that drives so much of human interaction and why that is, and what trauma in these people's lives have led them to traumatize others. And it's not an excuse, but it is sort of this framework of like, okay, what trauma-based work can be done? Because we know that it's possible to overcome trauma. And in looking at programs like Women for Women, and looking at real efforts to not only put a Band-Aid on the solution, but to change society so that those in power respect from the ground up what the people that make up their country, their community, the people around them, that we have this, a little more trust in each other's goodness, and a little more faith in ourselves that we are good, and a little better communication about our traumas, and all of those things adding up to what would hopefully be a much safer society, and one much less fear-based.
And I think, one of the inspiring things about the work that we're privileged to do at Women for Women is I was interviewing the head of our program in Rwanda, and I said, how are you managing to keep hope during this period of COVID? And she said, we came from the valley of the genocide. Our neighbors turned on each other and hundreds of thousands of people were killed. And yet we have built back a society that is, doing pretty well. And so she was like, if we can come back from that, and that kind of, and one of the things that Rwandans and others that we work in several countries where there have been genocides, forgiving gives you peace. It doesn't mean that it's okay what happened. Like when you forgive someone, that doesn't make it okay. When you try to understand someone, as you were just speaking about, that also does not make it okay. But it's necessary to come to some kind of solution. So I think that's really profound what you're saying, and also links fundamentally to us trying to bring bridges across between men and women, between different ethnicities, across different religions. In northern Nigeria, where the conflict is often thought about as religious fundamentalism, but actually it's rooted in, people who are herders versus people who are farmers, and land conflict, and that getting blown out of proportion by different people who want power, and then people managing to come together across that religious divide that has been created, and bringing those communities together is phenomenal and inspiring. But but you were just saying that it was a tough day, and one of the things that we try to talk about in this Hope Beyond the Headline series is, so talk a little bit more about what are those practices you have personally, or that you've come to appreciate during this time of how do you cope and how do you keep hope going? And
I have been, right after I speak with you, I have this arts community through my church, and we're all trying to come up with ways to express ourselves for our new online church because it's suddenly like, what videos do we make, how do we work remotely with each other? And so we're trying to come up with solutions that way that are meaningful, that speak to our values, and that actively seeking hope gives you hope. You sort of turn that part of your brain on when and I think also the other thing that allows me hope is giving myself time to mourn the things that need to be mourned. Like yesterday I cried a lot, and speaking to my daughter about why, part of my stress is sort of bigger picture, and part of it is just in the immediate, like, I can't believe this is still happening. But I also feel like we are aware that it's happening in a way that we haven't been. I'm speaking specifically about police brutality in this country. I am, but also about we live in this we have global information that can kind of wear on you. I was just looking at the situation in DRC is currently mind-boggling in terms of its the intractable problems of it.
Yeah.
So I think taking time to mourn those seemingly intractable problems, while also having taken that time to then go, okay, and then we need an action to follow it. And then you need support. And I have been finding support in my local community and finding these ways. Like I just brought a prayer shawl, picked it up at one of the, from this woman who makes them at my church, and then brought it to a hospital for another friend of hers. And it was just this act of like, I've got to take this shawl from point A to point B. And I walked away from the hospital and I almost teared up just at the simplicity of this one act and getting myself out of my comfort zone and going to a stranger's house to pick this up and like going to a hospital to drop it off. It just, this sort of the simplicity of the task meant so much to me. And I think keeping it small, as you have said about Samantha Power's quote about shrinking the change, because it's like, you're right. Okay, I'm not gonna, the political situation in DRC is not gonna be fixed today. The justice system, you know, the penal system in this country is not gonna be, in America, is not gonna be fixed today. But it can be fixed. It can.
And I think it circles back to what you said about it's such a powerful reason for you to say that you've become an actor, is the ability to understand stories and share stories. And I think this new digital age, I mean, my mom was a civil rights activist, and she was saying, as we were watching the videos and talking about how powerful it is, at least we know now, and at least that gets out more to more people. And then that does, I mean, it surprised me a little bit actually, that sort of what I sometimes think of as collectivism, when you sort of just join a social media action, but actually that led to concrete actions in the case of Ahmed Arbery. And it's so the visibility and more people knowing and the mobilization happening is a part. It's not enough because we have to have structural change. But that's what's so powerful about you being an ambassador for Women, is that we don't see these images. Like there are no images of Congo or Nigeria or what's happening in Iraq on our television screens right now. I mean, never mind that the epicenter is in South America right now, never mind that millions more people are facing starvation in Nigeria and Congo because of the impact of the economic, people call it the secondary effects of COVID, but I think it's actually, it's primary, right? So the complete collapse of health infrastructure in Yemen, and the fact that we now have 3 sections of Cox's Bazar in quarantine. Like we're just, you have to go to Al Jazeera or like, it's just not on our television screen. So the ability to have someone like yourself who has a platform with many people interested in what you're interested in, to be able to share those stories and get them out, because we're all one humanity. And as Samantha says, if you can't, maybe you can't change the whole world, but you can change a person's world. And if you think of the complexity of each of our individual worlds and how much it means if someone gives you a massive opportunity, changing a world is profound. It has a profound ripple effect on dozens of other people. So it's, and as you were just saying, when you can help someone else, that helps you.
Yeah, it's hugely empowering. I mean, it really did give me a sense of like, I can, you know, in the face of feeling so helpless because I'm not a biologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not an essential worker, I'm just at home, what can I do? Without putting myself at too much risk to then make things worse, you know, just like, okay, how can I actually, and so starting with something small and, you know, the intractable problem of homelessness, like supporting the people, I live in LA, it is just breathtaking. It's a breathtakingly large problem. But like, if I can drop off bottles of water, if I can drop off, you know, Ralph's, like a grocery store gift card around these communities, like get somebody a meal, get somebody the water they need in the moment, like that empowers me to feel like change is possible on this incremental level, and then inspires me further to say, actually, potentially this could actually, you know, we can change this fully.
Yeah. So, but give us a little bit more of a window into your worlds. How has, and your industry, some of it's obvious, but some of it we won't know. How is COVID and social distancing, physical distancing impacted both your professional life and your personal life?
Well, professionally, we don't know what the future holds. I cannot wear a mask in front of a camera. None of us actors can. It's going to be a real exercise in trust. And it's going to be a real balance, as everywhere, between corporate protection and worker protection. It seems pretty clear that, there'll be some kind of waiver system to get people back at work, to protect the big corporations from being sued, because there is a limit to how much social distancing can be accomplished on a film set. Camera operators and the focus pullers are by necessity closer than 6 feet. Actors acting in a scene together, we're not going to be 6 feet apart all the time.
And you're in an enclosed space projecting a voice. I mean, singing is one of the things that has been found most risky. And I've been thinking about that you, especially in theater, I presume you really.
Well, in theater, we don't think, theater is a whole other bag of bananas than just going back to set, because people are not, it's already been such a problem keeping costs down enough that you have an audience that is diverse and not only like rich, white, and 70 plus. And in this time, when we're talking about the possibilities of social distancing within the theater, the economics just don't make sense, especially on somewhere like New York. So it's something that we're all thinking about and trying to figure out. I know for dancers, for musicians, for any live performer, the real thing that really worries me, I don't believe that live music will go away, but the concern is sort of the Naomi Klein concern of what happens to the smaller independent stuff, especially in terms of live music venues and smaller radio stations, smaller, more independent-minded venues and platforms, and movies, like how you operate. In some ways, independent movies are sort of more agile and smaller crews. So there is a way that indie movies have a path forward more than big juggernauts. There's also the path forward that's basically just everybody's in front of a CGI screen. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens.
Well, human ingenuity is incredible. I saw some of the virtual theater you were doing for one of the NGOs you support, and managing to put something together that was interesting and creative. I'm sure that's not as satisfying for all of us. It's not as satisfying, but it is inspiring to see the ingenuity and the creativity. And one of the silver linings on the small business, what's made me feel good, is that it's the small independent farms that seem to be able to adapt the best to the new realities of the food supply chain. And so that's been heartening to see smallholder farmers, or not smallholder farmers, but independent farmers being able to pick faster, because they are. And hopefully we all come out of this with more local, less massive delivery and more supporting local. I've certainly been called to support local as much as possible. I know people who are getting takeaway from restaurants every night, not because they want the takeaway, but just because they want to support the restaurants.
Yeah, and support the community, and also shorten the supply lines. I think we're also aware of the security need to have a little more flexibility and adaptability in these supply chains, because you suddenly are like, oh, this Toyota model of only having as much as you need at any time. You're like, oh no, but stockpiling sometimes is a good idea. Like figuring out how we might be able to adapt in a crisis and not just have the bare minimum structural needs is kind of good.
Yeah. it's in a different scale. It's a little bit like the women that we serve whose lives are disrupted by conflict usually, and then they have a whole trajectory and a plan that they want to go on, and then it gets interrupted and they have to completely pivot. And a story I heard this morning from our Iraq team, which was lovely, was a woman had only just been through a couple of months of training with us, and she had chosen tailoring, and her business wasn't set up yet because our program helps women set up a small business and with vocational track and business skills and all kinds of different inventions. But she figured out with just that few months of support, she created a mask business. So now she is sewing masks and selling them. And this is a woman who had no business experience, who had no entrepreneurship experience, who, entered just to learn how a bit of sewing. And she's figured out, okay, the opportunity in this crisis is that I'm going to make and sell masks, which maybe sounds simple, but is actually profound in this woman's life, who when she started our program, because we choose women in our program who are destitute, poor, the most marginalized, mostly non-literate in some societies like Afghanistan and parts of Iraq, often haven't been outside the home, it's being restriction of even moving. So for her to do that and to pivot and to say, okay, I'm going to change, find some new form of business is another testament to that creativity that we are seeing. That does give me quite a bit of hope in this time.
Yeah, and that these women are given, that their ideas are treated with respect. Because I know how it can be such a shift when you're working with a creator who's like, that's a great idea, let's implement it, versus somebody like, ugh, terrible, and you just sort of wither, that part of yourself withers. And when you're in a different environment, you're like, oh my gosh, my ideas are valid. What exists?
Or even just sometimes being seen. So I was in Congo and Rwanda in March. So right before, we're very lucky to have been able to visit people right before we had to all go into more isolation. And this woman I met in Congo, Beatrice, and her story just, because it's so recent, just really forefront of mind. She had the most horrific life story, just multiple traumas you can't even imagine. And by the time she lost 3 of her 4 children, and she was held as a slave for a couple of times. And now she's in her 20s. And she said that the first time she got that $10 stipend, it meant the absolute world to her. And obviously $10 doesn't transform someone's life. What transformed her life is she literally said that it's the first time since her dad died when she was 8 that she felt that somebody believed in her. The fact that someone from the United States wanted to invest in her in this border town of Congo along the Burundi, that's what mattered to her. That someone saw her, believed in her, cared about her, was so profound that alone, it is not even that someone validated her dream, they validated her. And that made her, just believe she could do stuff because someone believed in her. So that sticks with me, and I'm thrilled because when she's only 3, when I met her, she's only 3 months into the program, and I knew we had to suspend programming in that area. And I was like, oh, is Beatrice going to get her $10? Yeah. I was thrilled both of the team figured out how to get cash to women even when we couldn't gather, and figured out how to get hygiene kits to people, and figured out how to pre-record messages on megaphones and get those out, all this creativity.
Yeah, the work on like getting the word out over radio programs, and like having your own SIM card to then use on somebody else's phone to get your transfer, like all the ingenious workarounds by region I was looking at, like, it's amazing. Humans are very, very clever.
Very clever. And look, we're thrilled that in Congo, we've started to regather people in groups of 7 and much smaller. And we're practicing like you are, thinking about with like, how do you get back to some kind of ability to allow people to connect more directly? But the innovations we've had in the meantime are gonna make us stronger. So that ability now to transfer money by mobile phones, and the money we've raised to help get more mobile phones in the hands of more women. And we've even done this pilot where you can have a chat box, because as I said, a lot of women are non-literate, but it's this incredible technology that allows you to use your phone without being literate, and to get messages. So the voice technology, and that technology is not normally available to the most marginalized populations, just like we're worried that the vaccine won't be available once we have one to those populations. But this experience that we all had to learn how to do education online, it's accelerated technology, and I hope is going to make it more possible for us to bridge the digital divide, as well as all the other divides that face the women that we serve.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do want to, especially this is take two, and I do want to ask you about your vision for the hope of women. So what do you hope for women in the future? And linked to that, so it's really two questions. What's the new normal? We talked about, we've been talking about in this whole series of Hope Beyond the Headlines, that we don't want to go back to normal, because normal is police brutality. Normal is, for a lot of people, working ridiculous hours. Normal, let's create a new normal, and maybe in our personal lives and in our work lives, we've actually discovered some things during this horrific last 10 weeks, and for some people more, that we want to keep. So what do you want to see for women, and what do you want to see for the world and yourself?
I want to see women supported in this recovery, not just supported to their pre-pandemic positions, but supported beyond that. So many of the first layoffs were women in this country, just because domestic workers, cleaners, so many of these positions were the first ones to go. Like women being on the edge is so common in here and the world over. So I want to see a real focus on a safety net that focuses on childcare, maternal health care, and a way to, a real way to support families, which are so often, we've seen, I mean, even I was reading an article in the Times about how many women might drop out of the workforce as schools have closed and as working from home becomes a thing, and suddenly, like, the vast majority of housework, parenting still falls to women. And I would love to see reorganization around that. Not because I don't think, I mean, momming is my favorite job, but trying to find equity in terms of the expectation of that would be amazing to see in the upheaval that we have seen. And I want to see, I have hopes that we'll be able to take a hard look at domestic violence after this, and look at violence against women in a new way, and to say, like, how many homes are safe? How many homes, like, what can we do to end the trauma that leads to men hurting their wives or partners, and leads women to be in these positions in the first place? Like, I want to look at those issues, that they're not only about women. They're, like, that's not a one-sided, that's not a woman's problem. Domestic violence is not a woman's problem. No, it's not.
No, I believe in that really profoundly, because I have personal experience of it. I was married to a man who was an explicit feminist ally, and we agreed to share childcare, and his career went for 4 years, and then my career for 4 years. And so while he was a house husband, he was so ridiculed by the society in which we lived, and so ridiculed by his own family, because he came from a family and a culture in which him washing a dish was considered just horrific, that in fact he became abusive and violent. And so, you know, although I don't condone him hitting me, especially because it was in front of the kids, I saw the trajectory, right?
Right.
So if you put all of men's self-worth in how much money you bring home, and then you ridicule a man if he's not, if the better option is for the woman to work, and that we have a men's engagement program, because if the woman has the better option to work and then the man agrees to let that happen, and then he gets ridiculed, which I've seen in many places, including in my own life, you know, it's to your point, you don't forgive the violence, but you got to understand that you got to give men another option. They have to be valued for it, which they are.
They have to be valued for themselves.
Yeah,
like
that's
not
right.
just based on whatever they're giving to society and earning. Like value and worth have to be just completely untied from economics.
Yes.
It's just
And certainly from violence. We definitely want it. Yeah.
So I just hope that those discussions can continue to be reframed as we reframe gender itself as a discussion point. Like, what is my hope for women? My hope for women is that we are better able to explain our own roles and the role of men in the development of those roles.
Yeah.
Because without each of those, without gender expanding,
yeah,
we're never going to solve it.
Yeah. And I've got a 24-year-old and a 25-year-old son. So I know, because I was the one that was like the gender activist, and my kids are like math nerd and a completely uninterested in anything activist. And then when they got to be about 18, they started correcting my language. They're like, Mom, well, as a cisgender, I'm like, what? And I really think that, you know, if you say that, you're verging on what? I'm like, what? Teenagers are schooling me on gender terms? What is going on?
It's great. I mean, I so welcome it, because I'm like, oh, maybe this is the shakeup that will continue to give us the real grappling with identity that we need to have in order to stop this from being, like, for domestic violence to stop being framed as a women's issue, for childcare to stop being framed as a women's issue, or one that women voters care about. Like, I'm sorry, do men not care about childcare?
Well, I love your vision for the future, and I certainly hope that you can get back on the screen, because one of the things that I loved about Devs, as we've talked about before, is the incredible way that without making it a statement, it is completely subverted any notion of, I mean, all the like super smart mathematician tech leaders in your show are women and women of color, and it just seems completely, it is completely normal and natural, and not to be, you know, so that's what's going to change the world too. So I hope you get back to telling your stories and helping us understand the world. And I thank you so much, Alison, for taking the time, for standing with us at Women for Women. For any of you who don't know Women for Women and you'd like to find out more, please do go to our website, womenforwomen.org. You can go to /see her, support her, and sign and pledge that we all stand in solidarity with women around the world. This is a global pandemic, and we're all impacted. And unless we solve this for all of us, we're not going to solve it for any of us. So thank you for your vision. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support, Alison. And thank you to all of you who have joined us to have this conversation.
Thanks so much.
All right. Have a good time out there volunteering with your community.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.